rise above, extinguish fear, rise above, extinguish.
Guys, welcome back once again to Rise Above. Big up all my new subscribers, there's a lot. The last episode of COVID-1984, episode 5, Track and Trace, is doing numbers. That's my biggest video so far. Thank you everyone that's sharing that. All of you, and I mean it. Everyone that's commenting on it, everyone that's sending me messages, thank you so much. Now I'm continuing with COVID-1984 tonight. If you're new to this channel, I seriously suggest you go and watch episodes 1 to 5 first, because you may not know what we're talking about. Sit down, buckle up, I'm going in on this one, okay? Right, so let's do a screen grab. 1, 2, 3. Should have the Rise Above screen. So let's start at the beginning of the story. We are here today, Thursday, the 8th of October. And guess what we've seen today in the UK? People, let me turn this down. People in military gear testing people on the street in Birmingham. This guy's confronting them, asking what they're doing, telling people to refuse the test. This is worrying. This was talked about, and all of a sudden it's happened. Okay, I just wanted to do that for today, to keep it up to date. All right, guys, cast your mind back to episode 2, where I talked about ID 2020, the plan to give everyone on the planet a digital ID, which is going to be incorporated with the max vaccination program, as we've seen in episode 2. Now let's go, I talked about some of the players in the game, the alliance, right? So some of the individuals and the organisations involved, alliance partners. Now we talked about Gavi, Microsoft, so both Bill Gates, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, now remember the Rockefeller Foundation, we're going to be talking about them a lot today. If you also remember that episode, or maybe it was episode 3, I showed you this article, Mint Press News, about how basically Trust Stamp, COVID Pass and MasterCard have teamed up to give this digital ID platform that involved digital payments. Now since then, let's go back to ID 2020, go to the general partners. Who's been added? MasterCard. So since the last video in episode 2, MasterCard I believe was not on there. Episode 3, I showed you MasterCard making moves in Africa, giving people this Trust Stamp, which is basically a digital payment system. Now they're on with ID 2020. Right, okay. So keep that in mind. We've got the Rockefeller Foundation, Microsoft, which is Bill Gates, and Gavi, which is Bill Gates. Now every good operation, every good PSYOP, every good false flag needs a drill. 9/11 had drills on the same day, a number of them, as did the 7/7 bombings, the Boston bombings. I even believe the Manchester bombings had some kind of drill going on at the same time, a simulation which mimics the event, causes confusion. If you look at false flag events, this is synonymous, it always happens. So we all know about the simulation that was just before coronavirus, right? I'm assuming everybody knows about Event 201. You must do. Event 201 was a roundtable exercise in October 2019, where they simulated a coronavirus outbreak which killed 66 million people. And it was headed by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, no surprises there. John Hopkins, here's a new player on the scene, and the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum, the guys that are talking about the Great Reset, which is about to happen, COVID-19, the Great Reset. This is all forming a pretty obvious picture. Okay, so John Hopkins. Now, this is one simulation which happened just literally in October, just before the actual coronavirus outbreak. Some people have said to me, one of my Facebook friends and also a good researcher, Mr. David Clancy, he suggested that Event 201, or he thinks, that it might actually still be a live exercise. We're actually still witnessing Event 201 now. Now, believe it or not, Event 201 is not the only pandemic simulation that's happened in the last sort of 10, 20 years. In 2001, John Hopkins and the Bloomberg School of Public Health did Operation Dark Winter, where I believe this is talking about a bioterrorism attack that is based on a pathogen that's basically, okay, smallpox. This is another roundtable exercise. Here we go, where it's talking about vaccinations. Okay, so this is in 2001, John Hopkins. Skip forward to 2005. Atlantic storm. How would world leaders manage the catastrophe of a fast-moving global epidemic of a deadly disease? Talking about biosecurity. So this is that's 3 simulations they've done of either an outbreak, a pandemic, or a bioweapon attack involving a respiratory disease with flu-like symptoms. When did SARS and MERS come around? Maybe these were the drills for them, who knows? Okay. Now, in 2018, there was another one called KDEX. Now, check this out.
Continuing our coverage of a new and deadly infectious disease.
The virus has some genetic elements of the Nipah virus.
The care of these patients requires extraordinary effort.
We cannot and will not voluntarily take patients from other hospitals.
The creation and intentional release of the Clade X virus.
The impact of not doing something has lots of consequences.
We can't retreat from the rest of the world.
The continuity of government here cannot be overestimated.
Federal quarantine of this scale is unprecedented.
The question everywhere, when will there be a vaccine?
We have got to engage the private sector.
They know that we don't have a vaccine yet. They want vaccines to be prioritized.
I would not want to pull those people back.
And we need on the ground to be able to assure protection of our first responders.
This is a non-starter. I'm going to need these people. I got this feeling in a whole lot of other places.
More than 40 countries are reporting outbreaks and many more of having cases.
Leadership requires doing things that are oftentimes unpopular.
This issue has the amazing capacity to be number 11 on anybody's list of 10 most important items.
We have been unbelievably weakened by this crisis.
What the world will look like when it's done is still very uncertain.
Okay, now, if you watch the same trailer for Event 201, they look almost identical. Event 201 has a much higher budget. You wouldn't know it from real life, basically. KDEX players. Oh right, so these people are actually actors playing Secretary of Defense, but they're not actors, sorry. They're actually former Attorney Generals. John Hopkins, okay. Now here's where it starts. So let me just recap, right? We've got this John Hopkins Institute, which has been involved in, is that four of these simulations. Also involved in Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Also involved in the Rockefeller Foundation. Here's where it gets weird. CLADEX, the Johns Hopkins University pandemic exercise of May the 15th, 2018, is exactly 666 days before the coronavirus pandemic declaration of March 11th, 2020. Now that sounds absolutely crazy. I've done it in the calendar, I've checked, it is 666 days, so that's true. I think why would that be the case? I mean, it could just be a crazy coincidence. It could also be a coincidence that new regulations of the rule of 6 feet apart, 6 people for 6 months. That's 666 again. 666 and 33 appear repeatedly throughout this whole exercise. And here we're looking at Gematria, which we touched on. This comes back to the Satanism and Dark Occult episode. If you haven't seen that, go and watch it. These people are absolutely obsessed with Gematria, the language of numbers and geometry, and they code it into everything for reasons that... Oh look, CLADEX is actually linked with Event 201. It's the same people that did it. And we've also got this one, Crimson Contagion, which is in August 2019. So this was in between KDEX and Event 201. Again, a roundtable, Homeland Security. This is actually the Trump administration getting ready for it. Everyone knew this was coming. So who's this John Hopkins? John Hopkins was around 1795 to 1873, an American entrepreneur, investor, abolitionist, philanthropist. There's that word again, which is very difficult, and it basically, Jimmy Savile was a philanthropist. George Soros is a philanthropist. You get the idea. Okay, so what else did he do? He, I believe I looked down here, he was basically a plantation owner, a tobacco plantation owner. Okay. Now look at this. When's this from? 2018, I believe. John Hopkins, Bristol mayors must face a $1 billion syphilis infection suit. A federal judge in Maryland said the Johns Hopkins University, because there's a university, an institute, a medical centre, like the Rockefellers, they've got about 6 or 7 different institutions, foundations, etc. And the the Johns Hopkins University, Bristol Myers Squibb, and the Rockefeller Foundation, so there's the link again with the Rockefellers and the Johns Hopkins Institute, must face a $1 billion lawsuit over their roles in the 1940s US government experiment that infected hundreds of Guatemalans with syphilis. I believe this is the Tuskegee experiment, very, very famous. So here's our first link between the Rockefellers, Johns Hopkins, and human experiments. Won't be the last. Get ready. We're going to look into eugenics. And before I tell you what eugenics is, this is from Johns Hopkins Medicine. This is a review of a book. Some of their fellowships wrote a book, Promises of Perfection, Genetic Perfection. If you thought eugenics was destroyed by its appalling association with Nazism and the Holocaust, think again. Eugenics is no longer a sticky, noisome residue to be scrubbed off the skin of human genetics before it can go to medical, writes Nathaniel Comfort in his new book, The Science of Human Perfection, Yale University, 2013. So sorry, this guy went to Yale. He wrote this book basically trying to reimagine eugenics because it has some very negative connotations, as I'm about to show you. And Johns Hopkins Medicine is basically saying, we think this is a good book. Right. Now, I'm going to show you a video which, yes, it's from Banned Video, which is part of InfoWars. Now, before anyone says anything, Alex Jones is InfoWars. Yeah, Alex Jones might seem crazy to some people, he might be a shill, but there's no getting away. In between 80 to 95% of what he says is basically true. Now, everything in this video, I'm just going to show you a part of this video because it's going to illustrate the link, which is going to blow this right open, okay? Here we go.
Nearly 2,400 years
in ancient
ago,
Greece, Plato discussed the importance of population control. Aristotle advocated the use of abortion and infanticide. In 1798, an essay on the principle of population was written by Thomas Malthus. He outlined the idea of positive checks, which are diseases, wars, disasters, famines, and genocides. Malthus believed that these things should be utilized to increase the death rate, and believed that human misery was an absolute necessary consequence. In 1859, Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species. In it, Darwin only hinted at the implications of human populations, but his cousin, Sir Francis Galton, became obsessed with the idea. In 1883, Galton published Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, wherein he wrote that his intention is to touch on various topics more or less connected with that of the cultivation of race, or, as we might call it, with eugenic. The term comes from the Greek word eugenis, of noble birth. In the early 20th century, eugenics became an academic discipline in universities. Organizations were formed and funded to win public support. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and the Cold Spring Harbor Institute rejected the idea that all humans are born equal and began selling the idea of cultivating a new master race of noble bloodlines. Planned Parenthood was formed in America by racial eugenics advocate Margaret Sanger. President of IBM, Thomas J. Watson, established a special subsidiary in Poland called Watson Business Machines to assist in the Nazi invasion of Poland. This business continued throughout the war, and IBM managed the entire operation from their headquarters in New York. During the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis quoted U.S. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in their own defense. They claimed that their eugenics program was being run from the United States. The Nazis were rightly admonished for war crimes, but not Thomas Watson. He went on to create the IBM World Trade Corporation and passed IBM on to his son. His granddaughter ended up marrying Margaret Sanger's grandson. Bill Gates' father worked on the board for Planned Parenthood, and his mother worked on the corporate board for IBM, who Bill partnered with to create Microsoft. With no medical background, Bill Gates then went on to become the world's foremost pusher of vaccines and population control. Do you think this is all coincidence? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds the WHO, the NIH, the CDC, and the UN. And now he is saying that until we get mass vaccinations, we might never be able to gather in groups.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be in a certain more optional, and so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
The president's coronavirus response team are all pushing the Bill Gates vaccination agenda. Dr. Fauci is on the leadership council for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In January of 2017, Anthony Fauci told a crowd at Georgetown University that there was a surprise outbreak during the Trump presidency.
There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Deborah Burr is a board member for the Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, which was founded by the Gates Foundation and known for dollars of fraudulent misuse of funds. In October of 2019, Bill Gates sponsored Event 201, a simulation that estimated 65 million people killed by coronavirus. In November of 2019, the Purebright Institute, funded by Bill Gates, was granted European patent number EP3172319B1 for a coronavirus vaccine that may be used to treat humans. Today, Dr. Fauci says the virus will keep coming back, and he says the ultimate game changer will be a new vaccine. In Australia, the Prime Minister is telling people the shutdown will last months, that it's the new normal, and that the only way out of your homes is to accept the vaccine. There is no proof that vaccines are the answer. In fact, the CDC admitted in federal court that it does not have studies to support the claim that vaccines do not cause autism. A top UN scientist admitted that vaccines are killing people. It is time to do some hard thinking. Will you allow your government to impose forced vaccinations?
Here I am.
If it keeps going the way
Nazis, Rockefeller, IBM, Bill Gates. Okay, that's a very crazy claim. So let's just go to the Rockefeller wiki page and let's find out if it's true. I just looked on the Rockefeller wiki page, Rockefeller Foundation. There we go. And I'll scroll down to Eugenics. Beginning in 1930, the Rockefeller Foundation provided a financial support to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, exactly like it just said in the video, which later inspired and conducted eugenics experiments in the Third Reich. Not inspired them, it actually conducted them, it says that there. The Rockefeller Foundation funded Nazi racial studies even after it was clear the research was being used to rationalise the demonizing of Jews and other groups. Up until 1939, Rockefeller Foundation was funding research used to support Nazi racial science at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Reports submitted to Rockefeller did not hide these studies were being used to justify, but Rockefeller continued the funding and refrained from criticising the research so closely derived from Naziology. So look, it's saying this on Wikipedia, even after it was proved that the Nazis were using this, he still continued funding the Nazis conducting eugenics. The Rockefeller Foundation did not alert the world to the nature of the German science and the racist folly that German anthropology promulgated, and Rockefeller funded for years after the passage of the 1935 Nuremberg racial laws. Jesus. The Rockefeller Foundation, along with the Carnegie Institute, there's another big name, was the primary financier for the Eugenics Record Office until 1939. So there we have it. This Columbian College of Arts and Science, the George Washington University, the horrifying American roots of Nazi eugenics. Now, the Rockefeller Foundation were also very closely linked with Spanish flu. Now, you just heard that they carried on openly funding the Nazis in their eugenic experiments after the Nuremberg racial laws. Here's this amazing article. Spanish flu of 1918 was really a bioterror attack on humanity. Did a military experiment vaccine kill 100 million people? Was it blamed on Spanish flu? Summary. The reason modern technology has not been able to pinpoint the killer influenza strain from the pandemic is because the influenza was not the killer. More soldiers died in World War I from disease than from bullets. Pandemic was not the flu, an estimated 95% or higher with deaths were caused by bacterial pneumonia, not influenza or a virus. The pandemic was not Spanish, etc., etc. And yeah, so what basically happened is the Rockefeller Institute administered their vaccine for the Spanish flu to, I think, thousands of the troops, and yeah, they all died. So, Rockefeller, oh no, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This is really, really interesting, and not a lot of people know about this document. In 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation wrote scenarios for future development and for future technology and international development. And in a nutshell, basically they're into simulations, the Rockefeller Foundation, they're into planning. And it says here in the opening, there's the contents, let's get past that. Letter from Judith Rodin, President. An important and novel component of our strategy, what is wrong with me tonight, is scenario planning, a process of creating narratives about the future based on factors likely to affect a particular set of challenges and opportunities. We believe that scenario planning has great potential for use in philanthropy to identify unique interventions, simulate and rehearse important decisions that could have profound implications, and highlight previously undiscovered areas of connection and intersection. Most important, by providing a methodological structure that helps us focus on what we don't know instead of what we already do know. They're into scenario planning, simulations and interventions. Now, if we scroll down, basically, in a nutshell, they have in this document 4 possible outcomes of the future and how technology is going to play a role in it. And let's go down to the 4 options that they have. And these 4 options are based on 2 axes. One of them is political and economic alignment of the world, and the other one is adaptive and creative capability of the world. Those are the 2 axes that this grid is on. So here it is. This is really important. Zoom out a little bit so I can see what's going on here. These are the 4 scenarios for the future that they envisaged in 2010. On the far left, with low adaptive capability and strong political and economic alignment, they have Lockstep. On the right, they have something called Clever Together, which is an adaptive creative high and a political alignment high. So Lockstep seems not very good. Clever Together looks all right. On the bottom left, with a low adaptive capacity, we have Hack Attack, and that's also with a low political alignment, a weak political alignment. And we have on the right, Smart Scramble. So this is an axis, a two-way axis with 4 possible outcomes of the future based on technology. Have a look at that. Where do you think it looks like we might be heading at the moment? Top left, Lockstep. Let's go down to what it says about the scenario which they have thought out in 2010 for Lockstep. Scenario narratives. A world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Now here's the scenario, check this out. In 2012, the pandemic that would have been anticipated for years finally hit. Unlike the 2009 H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus struck around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population, killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods stretched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Ring a bell? Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet. Although disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. Well, that hasn't happened. So there's an anomaly. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the US, but across borders. However, few countries did fare better, China in particular. Oh really? That's funny. The Chinese government quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than in other countries, enabling a swift post-pandemic recovery. That's pretty fucking accurate. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risking exposure. During the pandemic, let's just scroll over a little bit. No, that way. Where did we get to? During the pandemic, national leaders from around the world flexed their authority and imposed tighter rules and restrictions, from mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Wow. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian, this is the important bit, even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crisis and rising poverties, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. That might be the level we're at now. Citizens willingly gave up their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states, nanny states, in exchange, well not nanny states, that's like big brother states, in exchange for greater safety and stability. Citizens were more tolerant, even eager for top-down directional and oversight. And national leadership had more latitude to impose order in the way they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight and took many forms. Biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interest. This is what's happening right now. In developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. Across the developing world, however, the story was different. A much more variable top-down authority took different forms in different countries, hinging largely on the capacity, the caliber and the intentions of their leaders. It's actually the other way around. It seems like a lot of the leaders in the third world countries have just stuck their middle fingers up to this plan and said, no, we're just not playing along. It's very interesting. In countries with a strong and thoughtful leader, citizens' overall economic status and quality of life increased. In India, for example, air quality drastically improved after 2016 when the government outlawed high-emitting vehicles. In Ghana, the introduction of ambitious government to improve. Okay, so this is painting like the positive picture of what this is going to do. I'm going to scroll down because there's this little timeline which is really interesting. Headlines in Lockstep. So apparently Lockstep happened in 2012. 2013, quarantine restricts interpersonal contacts, cellular networks overloaded. 2015, intercontinental trade hit by strict pathogen controls. Italy addresses immigrant caregiver gap with robots. So, right, let's have a little recap. The Rockefeller Institute, which I would say they are literally one of the heads of the multi-headed hydra of these fucking medical mafia pirates. These are like the equivalent of the Purbright Institute, which is all linked in as we just saw in that video. These guys have been simulating disasters, planning for it, planning the outcomes, the Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. They were there in the Spanish flu, administering vaccines that allegedly actually caused those 150 to 100 million deaths. They've been like that with the Hopkins Institute. I mean, I didn't even go to their website. Where is it? Rockefeller's. But their website, let's get it, Rockefeller Institute. They look like they're saving the world, and I've got a newsflash for you, that's not the case. Rockefeller Foundation. So if you go on their website, decent work and economic growth, affordable clean energy, good health and well-being, learn more. Oh yeah, by the way, these guys are pretty much heading up all of the testing in the US for COVID. So where did we get to? Yeah, Rockefellers. Lockstep. So it looks like what's happened is we've had the virus, which they talked about, and they're now going down Operation Lockstep. Guys, do you know what? There was so much information there, I actually had to stop. I felt my enthusiasm starting to wane because it was just getting, there's a lot going on there and I've got to do this justice, okay? So, to link in with everything I've said before about ID 2020, Agenda 2030, how this is not just about a max vaccination, it's not just about an ID, it's about a lot more. Let's go through some bullet points. So in 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation sat out and planned 4 future scenarios using technology for the future, how they'll be utilised for these future problems they envisioned in the world. One of them is called Operation Lockstep. Now, there were 4 simulations run of this event, I'm going to allege. 2 of them were conducted beforehand in 2001 and 2005. 2 were conducted after this document was written in 18 and 19. Johns Hopkins Institute was involved in every single one. Now, in Operation Lockstep, the flu pandemic bio-attack of these pathogens triggers Lockstep. It talks about digital biometric ID, straight from the page of ID 2020, of which Rockefeller and Bill Gates are some of the founding members of. The Rockefeller Foundation did literally fund the Nazis and their eugenics programs, all the horrible experimentation you've heard of to find the master race. The concentration camps were also used to test vaccines. The Gates family links to Planned Parenthood, Eugenics, also links to IBM, the Nazi computer company, and that helped Gates get Microsoft. Johns Hopkins linked to the Rockefeller Foundation through the eugenics experiments in the 1940s. Johns Hopkins run all 4 of the corona simulation involving some involving the Gates Foundation. The most notable is Event 201. I mean, I'm reading these, I've just made these notes and I'm reading them back and it's kind of staggering. I believe, right, basically what we've got here is a conglomerate of techno barons and medical mafia pirates, and between them, along with the Rothschild Herbright Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, they basically own every asset of coronavirus. Serco helped them patent the actual virus, helped them patent the vaccines. They own every aspect of track and trace, of the simulations, of the vaccine rollout. And let me just say something, right? A patent, you can't patent something which is naturally occurring, yeah? So if you have a patent on coronavirus, that means one of 2 things. The thing which you have patented, the coronavirus, is not natural, it is man-made or not natural. Or 2, you have an illegal patent. Now, considering that Serco are running the US Patent Office, or in control of it, okay, so Serco is involved in there as well. Now, along with Corona State, Serco have given the Herbright multiple patents for corona and its vaccine. The Herbright Institute links directly to the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Wuhan University. The Medical Mafia Pirate Coalition own and administer every single aspect of the corona operation, from start to finish. The simulations, the planning, the testing, the track and trace, the vaccines, and obviously Bill Gates' massive influence in the media as well. I've said it before, medical mafia pirates, a conglomerate of them own this from start to finish. Please, guys, don't believe everything I've said on face value. Google these names: Herbright Institute, Serco, Kinetics spelled with Q's, the Pilgrim Society, Rockefeller Foundation. Just go and have a look. I think they want to use this vaccine to actually make a patent on our DNA. I'll maybe go into that in the next video about what an RNA vaccine actually is and how it edits our DNA using CRISPR gene editing technology. Once you've edited something, then you can patent it. So imagine in the future, if this all rolls out and we have the digital quantum dot tattoo with our payment system from Microsoft and from MasterCard in it, we have the CRISPR gene editing technology administering the vaccines and going up to the 5G and the AI system, which is monitoring everyone's health in real time. They will own us. That's how cattle are looked after in a farm. That's how a good farmer looks after his herd. He has an app on his phone to look at the health of his herd based on RFID implants that they have in cattle. If that's real, you can look that up. Well, what do all good farmers do? They have 100% control of their herd or their flock. And I hate to say it, guys, but what's happening right now is we're edging closer and closer into a digital pen, a digital prison, administered by Crown Commercial Services, Serco, Kinetic providing the technology, Rockefeller Foundation and Pirbright owning the patents on the vaccines, the viruses, maybe eventually on our DNA. Guys, thank you again for listening in. I had to do this extra little wrap up. I couldn't just peter off like that. Please, if you care about this information, if it resonates with you, if you care about what's going on, share this with your friends and family, people that haven't quite woke up to what's going on yet. Subscribe, like, and most of all, rise above.
So it seems like they turned up the pressure on the speed of unfolding agendas. Endless means more meat for the blender. Away from your breathless dream, unconsciously rendered. You surrendered all ways and means to fight and combat a killer vaccine from a wicked regime with a war machine. No hesitation to bomb that. Any destination to bomb that. The laxability to bomb back. I never take up arms against my brother, so just tell me, are you on that? So we're out these rings to push the extremes. Tired of blood flowing in streams and the fire in scuds with luminous